can immigration actually fix the problem that Canada is trying to solve with labor shortages?
The joke about Canada is we have the most PhDs driving taxis. If you don't speak French, good luck getting into Canada on PR from outside Canada right now. Virtually impossible.
For anybody who is new listener or viewer, welcome to As Told by Canadian Immigrants or Immigration Story. I'm your host, Christina McPherson. I'm here with one of the pioneers of the platform Visto, Josh Schachnow. You were an immigration lawyer. So I want to talk a little bit about your journey into immigration law and how you got to that place in the first place.
So the beginning part is boring. I got into immigration specifically was a little bit fluky because I finished articling. The biggest shame of all of this is now a lot of Canadians and/or we'll call it more recent immigrants. In the early 2020s, 650,000 new international students coming into Canada each year. And this is a country of what, we're 40 million now?
There is a big disconnect between the shortages and the people, immigrant retention, because you bring them here, you attract them here, you bring them here, and then a lot of people leave.
Now we have hundreds of thousands of permits expiring per year, and people don't know what to do. And the students are blaming the government, and the government's blaming the agents. Immigration is largely fixed fee. If you're charging $4,000 for an express entry application, but not everybody, especially recent graduates, can afford $4,000 out of their pocket.
When you're new and you can't afford to hire, this still can be your team, and it is way more cost effective than hiring somebody, and they don't need time off.
I spoke to one of our clients. He started a new firm, and within 8 months, he went from 0 to 40K in top line revenue. Immigration firms are very simple businesses. What I would do if I had to start from scratch is I would start. One of my pieces of advice for new immigration practitioners, and this goes really for any industry, is to
One of the biggest reasons why I stayed away from going into immigration consultancy and becoming a licensed professional is the paperwork. I dread the paperwork. I find the forms very repetitive, long, and I find the manual task of filling them out very inefficient, very. Then I became an intern as an immigration case manager for a short while. And I was like, there has to be something different. There has to be a better way. And then I came across Visto. And the most recent update got me really excited because it not only fills out the PDF forms, but now it's also doing the online forms. If you are an immigration professional and you're thinking about taking Visto for a spin, there is a 30-day free trial. And if you use the code as told by 10, you can get 10% off your first 3 months using Visto. Go check it out, use that trial and take advantage of this discount because this will help you save some time and even some stress in filling out these very, very, very fill out forms. So I'm here with one of the pioneers of the platform Visto, Josh Schachnow. And we're going to talk about Visto and even his introduction or his journey throughout the immigration profession. So welcome, Josh. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks, Christina, for having me. You nailed my last name, which many people don't do. And so we're off to a great start.
Perfect. For anybody who's new to a new listener or viewer, welcome to As Told by Canadian Immigrants or Immigration Story. I'm your host, Christina McPherson. Now, Josh, you were an immigration lawyer. So I want to talk a little bit about your journey into immigration law and how you got to that place in the first place.
Yeah, so the beginning part is boring. I always wanted to be a lawyer when I was growing up. And I did my BCom I'm born and raised in Ottawa. I did a BCom at Carleton University. I knew right away I wanted to go to law school. I went to Western Law in London, Ontario, and I entered the practice of law. Now, how I got into immigration specifically was a little bit fluky because I finished articling. So in Ontario, when you complete law school, you have to then article, which is basically a 10-month paid internship, and then you have to pass the bar exam. In my articles, I didn't do immigration law. I actually had zero interest in immigration, to be honest. I didn't take immigration in law school. I didn't do any immigration work in articling. And what happened is I finished, and I wasn't thrilled with mostly the civil litigation that I did in articling. And I just happened into an opportunity where a good friend of mine said, "Hey, Josh, my dad is retiring. He's closing his law firm. He's practiced in immigration for decades. If you want to open your own law firm, he would love to like work with you, mentor you, provide you with guidance. And at the time, this was around 2017, when number one, immigration was great in Canada, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit and how that's evolved. Mm-hmm. And Express Entry had just come out and the global talent stream was doing well. And he was like, you should open up a firm and focus on tech workers, help companies bring tech workers to Canada. And so I did a little bit of research and I said, sure. And I ended up starting my own practice. And, the rest was history in the sense that I started the practice under the tutelage of this lawyer who is retiring. And I very quickly built a little niche practice, largely doing global talent stream work permit applications and the LMIAs and helping those workers get PR through Express Entry, which again, at the time was very easy to navigate, especially with a closed work permit. So that's how I got into it. I'll take a pause. We can continue the story or we can touch on any of those points as well.
Well, that's interesting because I did see where you do help tech workers come. So, not a lot of people, LMIA is from my world anyway, is kind of like a unicorn almost because not a lot of people get it. It's not but you've done quite a lot of LMIA applications. It sounds like.
Again, keep in mind what the time think of Canadian immigration as yes. Pre-COVID and post-COVID. Yeah, pre-COVID immigration in Canada was a whole different story. And the other important factor too is the tech industry was very different in 2017, 2018, 2019, right? At that point in time, everything was going great. The economy was growing. The tech industry was growing. People were raising a lot of money. And you couldn't find a software developer in or around Toronto for less than, let's call it like $200K, right? Like an intermediate to senior. So a lot of tech startups at the time, not just in Toronto, in Ottawa and Montreal and BC, like I helped companies from all over the country who were hiring remote developers from abroad. They'd maybe try them out for a few months. And if it worked well, they'd sponsor them and bring them to Canada. Now, again, this is not like everyone and their mother, right? This is typically like intermediate to senior software developers, engineers, data scientists, right? Stuff like that. Right. But also today is different. Today you can graduate from a software engineering program and it still can be a little bit tough to find a job. Back then, they were throwing money at developers, right? So very different time. Right.
Okay. So now fast forward to post-COVID, because of course, pre-COVID, I know was a lot more predictable. Even for me, I came here in 2014 and went through the first year of Express Entry. So now you have a different view on immigration now post-COVID and transitioned even out of immigration law. So talk to me a little bit about the changes that you've seen, what you like and don't like about it, and how you ended up transitioning out of immigration.
Yeah, and I'll quickly just highlight around 2020 is when I got so bored of the form filling like you that I co-founded Visto, which is a platform for law firms. And, we can talk about that after as well. And so I am still very much entrenched in immigration because at Visto, we sell software to immigration firms, right? So that's number one. But let me actually get to your question. The problem is, and those who have been in the immigration industry for, since before 2020, most of us see this quite clearly because we lived through it. The government left the floodgates open for way too long, right? So the narrative in the 20-teens, even in 2020 and 2021 was immigration is great. We're not having enough babies in Canada. Let's bring more and more and more and more and more. And that's good. To a certain extent, as they say, everything is okay in moderation. The government did not allow moderation. The floodgates opened, and we can talk about how and why. They let everyone and their mother and their sister and their brother in. The vetting dropped, right? So like we've heard reports that IRCC wasn't even looking at letters of acceptance, right? They were, in some cases skipping background checks, et cetera, et cetera. So it got to the point where like from the mid 20-teens, where we'd normally have maybe 100,000, 150,000 international students approved each year, to in the early 2020s, 600, 650,000 new international students coming into Canada each year. right? And this is a country of what? We're 40 million now, right? At the time, maybe in the mid to high 30s. So what do you expect, right? Number one, when you're letting in so many people and we don't have the housing and we don't have the healthcare systems and we don't have the infrastructure. And number two, and this is what is also, I think, really important and getting lost on a lot of people, is the quality. Because what happened when the Christinas of the world applied and came through Canada is they were vetted properly, and it was a little bit of a difficult process. And so the best of the best made it through, and we got really high quality students who graduated and then got a job and then had to put in effort and get in through PR with a good degree and legitimate skills to enter the workforce. What happened was you had years where hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of students were funneled in. They took biz admin degree and, random college programs, whichever ones had the highest acceptance level, because that's what the, study abroad agents were peddling or whatever. And then what happens? The quality drops of the output, right? Now, I'm not here to say we should be pointing at people and giving everybody a score and some people are better than others. But what happened was it became so easy that people would just take any pathway they could, take any program they could, because they thought it was a free pathway into Canada that would lead to PR. We're seeing the damages of that now, right? Because the pendulum has swung back. And now we have hundreds of thousands of permits expiring per year, right? There's like tens of thousands expiring per month, apparently, I guess, depending on the month. And people don't know what to do. And the students are blaming the government and the government's blaming the agents and the agents, you know what I mean? And it's just a cluster of craziness. It's exhibit A of what happens when you leave the doors wide open and don't regulate it for way too long.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, we're seeing the brunt of that. Because you brought up that point, because I'm going to be starting a series, right, about the immigration paradox. Right. And because you just spoke about how you got kind of bored of the form filling in 2020, and that's when things were getting crazy even. So there's even more forms to fill because there's more people and all of that stuff. Can immigration actually fix the problem that Canada is trying to solve with labor shortages and stuff? Because if you have a population of 100,000 and they need more doctors or they need more teachers. So then you bring the doctors and the teachers, you add to the population that already is experiencing this shortage. So now you're filling the demand, but you're also creating more demand because now you've brought 50 doctors who also have families and children and they need more cars and more NyQuil. I remember going to Shoppers Drug Mart once and the NyQuil shelf was empty, just empty. Right. So
I guess it's good for the company that owns NyQuil. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Absolutely, Christina. And this is, I think, the biggest shame of all of this is now a lot of Canadians and or we'll call it more recent immigrants are anti-immigration. And I understand why. Like, if you don't know immigration really well, I absolutely understand why you might be very totally, anti-immigration right now. But a lot of people don't realize that if done well, which by the way, it was for a long time in Canada, go back less than 10 years, we were world renowned globally for our immigration programs, right? Express Entry, when it first launched, GTS, when it first launched and these were run well, were world-renowned immigration programs. In less than 10 years, it was all totally blown up, right?
Yeah.
In the worst way possible, which is a huge shame. So to your question is, absolutely you can, if it's done properly, right? Because here's the reality with Canada and most first world countries. We're not having enough kids, right? Like a lot of this stuff, it actually comes down to like relatively simple math. Right? Canada's going through this problem. Japan is reportedly really going through this problem. Like a lot of other, I think most first world countries are actually not having enough babies. Right? Yep. So what does that mean? You have two choices. You continue to do nothing, in which case your population will slowly decline, which means your economy will shrink, which is really bad for any country. or you have to bring people in from outside. Or I guess you could convince your own people to have more babies, but that's really hard to do, as we're seeing, right? And that's a whole other conversation that I'm not an expert in. Yeah. The key is the countries that figure out how to bring in the right people in the right amount, right? So for example, they recently made some of these changes. Like, I don't agree with everything they've done with Express Entry over the last few years, but I do think the industry specific draws were a good idea, right? Because one of the problems with the Express Entry score is you could have a 500 and I could have a 500, but you could be a doctor and I could be, say, useless to the Canadian labor market. Exactly. So what the country could have, or what we should have done is, number one, continue to keep numbers low, or at least manage the increase. Don't let applications increase 50% year over year, right? Or 100% year over year, right? Like, if you go back and look at the data from like 2020 to 2024, just look at the explosion in approvals. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see, why all these problems happened. Right? So immigration can absolutely, like, the joke about Canada is we have the most PhDs driving taxis, right? That's the joke, like the global joke about Canada. We haven't been able to run immigration properly. And we also haven't found a great way to integrate these newcomers, many of which are skilled and educated, into our workforce, which is, I think, a big lost opportunity.
Right. And there is a big disconnect between the shortages and the people. Like, they haven't solved that problem, and even solved the problem of helping retention. That's a whole other topic, immigrant retention, because you bring them here, you attract them here, you bring them here, and then a lot of people leave. So then the second part of that conversation about the immigration paradox and can people solve the problem, now comes into even your introduction of Visto into the world. Is, I believe that just people alone won't be able to solve the problem. I think they need to bring technology into it. They need to bring AI into it, because I'll talk about medicine, the medical practice, for example, is that because it's easily accessible or not free, prepaid, doctors don't have the time to go down the rabbit hole to get investigative. They don't have the time to actually explore what's wrong with you. It's kind of just throw a prescription at it. And we're just increasing the demand for that, so to speak. So now we're talking about tech. That's a whole nother series, a whole other conversation. But now you got tired of the form filling like I did, and I went searching, and I'm like, please God, let there be something. And I found Visto, and I was so happy. At the time, that was before the online form filling update, right? So I was extremely excited with the online form filling update. So let's talk a bit about AI in immigration practice. There are a few people that push back on it in a negative way, so to speak, because they don't want, AI can't tell you how to go about your immigration journey, so to speak. But let's talk about the pros and the cons of AI in the immigration practice.
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing that we do along those lines is we don't sell any technology to aspiring immigrants, right? We only build and sell technology to immigration firms. So, registered, legitimate immigration consultants and immigration lawyers. And I mean, we can talk about why, but one of the reasons why is because I still think AI is a tool that needs to be used by humans. AI is not yet good enough to replace humans. It's a tool that still require a human in the loop, especially in legal, right? Especially in something like immigration, you make one wrong move, you answer one question incorrectly, especially these days, because now IRCC is being super picky, and you're done. Right, your application's refused, and you're down a whole other rabbit hole. So I'll just say we provide software, AI, technology, automation to immigration firms to help them operate more efficiently, which I think is a huge win, because the whole reason I started the company, like the reason Visto was initially co-founded, I have a co-founder, Alex, he's our CTO, he builds all the tech, right? I can't write code, so he gets all the credit for building the product, is the amount of manual work that has to go into preparing an immigration application is just insane. Not just the fact that you have to copy and paste into a form, but the fact that some applications might have 5, 6, 7 different forms, and 30% of each form is
It's the same
redundant.
information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So not only do you have to copy and paste onto one form, you have to copy and paste onto 4, 5, 6 different forms. And sometimes you're copy and pasting the same answers onto 2 or 3 or 4 different forms. Number one. And then there's just so many other manual tasks, back and forth, reminders, this, that, and the other, that when I was practicing immigration, I really felt that like 50% of my time was spent doing work that technology could do faster and better.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure you and most consultants and lawyers out there as well have had this thought, which is, and this is the thought that ultimately pushed me over the edge. I was like, this is not why I went to law school. This is not why I took all those tests and did all this work and blah, blah, blah. Right. Like a lot of us get into law or immigration or whatever it might be because it's mentally stimulating. It's challenging. We want to help people. Not because I want to sit at my computer at 4:30 p.m. copy pasting 60 answers for a client, right? Not to mention, if you use technology, AI, automation, whatever it might be in a positive way like this, you can then provide an even better service to that one client because you have more time and brain energy to spend providing even better communication, more updates, more advice, whatever it might be. Yep. And then also help more people. Because instead of, most firms come to us because they're spending 10 to 15 hours on a file preparing an application. And when you automate all the BS, pardon my short form French here, when you automate all the crap out of it, it should really only be like a 3 to 5 hour task, right? Which means you can do double the files, right? You can help twice as many people. You can improve the personal touch that you're providing because you actually have more time in a day, right? So that was some of the thinking there.
Yeah, and you can hit deadlines more efficiently, effectively, or even possibly because I feel like that was the next thing for me. It's just that it's such a time sensitive process that you need, like say for instance, somebody got an ITA, and they came to you at the 11th hour and you need to get things done quickly. The technology can help you to hit deadlines and not be overwhelmed by the deadlines. Awesome.
Yeah. And access to justice as well, right? Because immigration is largely, this is different in other areas of law. Immigration is largely fixed fee. So if you're charging $4,000 for an express entry application, which by the way is probably on the cheap side right now, right? Yeah. I don't know about you, but not everybody, especially recent graduates, can afford $4,000 out of their pocket, right? So what happens when that firm, it usually takes 10 to 15 hours, can do it in 3 to 5, they're more likely to freeze or lower their prices, which means it's more affordable, which means more people can actually afford to use expert help, right? So there's definitely an element of access to justice there, especially as more companies come out with like direct to consumer. I would still be very careful with like direct to consumer AI solutions, but there's that element as well.
Okay. And just because I know you've posted a couple of, I guess, experiences or testimonials from people who have used the platform in terms of how quickly it has, or how much more efficient or how much time they can save. So how much time on average is the average firm or consultant who's using Visto saving on application filling or filling out forms?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, maybe we should ask for like more explicit data. I would say like we kind of want to cut stuff in half, right? At least as like a starting point. Because most immigration firms charge fixed fees and they don't charge by the billable hour, they don't track exactly how long it's taking, right? So I typically ask at the beginning before they start Visto, how long does it take you to do this and that and the other? And like I said, probably the average file, especially a PR file, which is, more extensive than a temporary residence file, is probably like the 10 to 20 hour range. Whereas when you automate the form filling, the PDF merge and compress, all the back and forth over email, et cetera, right? We try to kind of like cut that down by 50%. What I hear from the most is just the firms that are able to grow their top line, right? So I posted about this a week or two ago because last week I spoke to one of our clients. He started a new firm. And within 8 months, he went from 0 to 40K in top line revenue. right? Which
Right.
you can't really do unless you overhire on the back end. And now what technology means is you don't have to hire a huge team. If you're super efficient with your operations and you're using automation and AI and platforms like Visto, especially when you're new and you can't afford tons of hires, you can still get so much more done and focus your time and energy on things like marketing and sales.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that you said, especially when you're new and you can't afford to hire. So you have a platform, the solopreneur grind. And most people who are going into this industry just starting are starting out with maybe a lower budget. They don't have a team to hire, and Visto can be your team. And it is way more cost effective than hiring somebody, and they don't need time off.
Yeah. And part of it was it was scratching my own itch because I had my own firm. I never wanted to grow a huge firm and manage 20 people, 50 people, 100 people. So at most I had one virtual assistant. And even still, I was like, I'm paying this virtual assistant hourly to copy and paste, right? And when I connected with Alex about this idea, my CTO, and he pointed out how easy like the beginning of Visto, we had no AI. AI wasn't even popular, right? AI wasn't really a thing when we actually started Visto. Probably 80% of what our platform does right now, like all the form filling you're talking about, there's no AI. It's all automation. And for two reasons. One of it is privacy and security, right? Like, do you want to share your client's data with some of these LLMs? That's a whole conversation that we could have if you want. But number two is like, you don't need AI. If your client fills out their name, we know where to put their name, right? In fact, you're taking a risk by using AI because if it hallucinates and like, that's a simple, hey, take their name and put it there on that form, right? That's a task that automation can handle no problem. So I'd say like 80-90% of our platform is pure automation. There's a few things that do AI and we're starting to leverage it a little bit more. But it's the firms that see this as a time saver and a growth opportunity that are making the most out of it. Trust me, there's still a lot of law firms, especially the older ones, more institutional ones. They see technology as a risk and as an expense. And my concern for them is that over the next 3 to 5 years, they're probably going to get blown out of the water by the new firms that are adopting. Some of these firms are hemming and hawing and talking about whether they think it's, good or not. The other half are already using it and going to blow them out of the water before they finish making their decision.
Yeah. Yep. And it's happening. If they're not seeing it already, they'll see it soon enough. And one of the things that I did like about the platform as well, because when I was doing my immigration case manager program, I had to do a lot of research, legal research. And so that's where the AI, I believe, comes in now, is to help with the case law and immigration research, which I used it. So I used it while I was an intern to do some research and all that stuff. So I'm a savvy user of the platform. Okay. So I reached out to just to put some context to people. Like, I reached out to Josh because I was like, this is amazing. People should know about it. And I'd like to shout it from the mountaintops. And here we are shouting it from the mountaintops. Right. So tell me a little bit about the the AI bot that can help with the case law research.
Yeah. So thank you. I'm very glad you reached out and I'm hoping people find this interesting. So what happened when AI started to kind of come on the scene, so to speak, is number one, we realized that AI was going to be huge. It was going to be a game changer. But number two is that especially in legal, you have to be careful, right? As we've kind of touched on a little bit. We've read the stories of hallucinations. We've read the stories of, lawyers getting scummed out by judges because they generated a brief with AI and didn't review it and it had fake cases and stuff like that, right? So what we knew from the start was, or what we thought from the start, was that number one, AI was going to be really big and helpful. And number two, it had to be applied very carefully in legal because of what's at stake, right? This isn't like generating a blog post and, posting it on your marketing website. So what we did was, we built a custom chatbot from the ground up that is only sourcing Canadian government and Canadian case law information specifically, right? To limit that hallucination factor, and that always provides direct sources, because in legal, again, we always want to be double and triple checking that everything's accurate. So what you're alluding to is within the Visto platform is our chatbot, where you can go in and you can either go down the road of asking it like about rules and regulations or about case law. And then you can just ask it questions. Hey, what are the eligibility requirements for express entry? Find me a case about a Nigerian citizen who was refused a TRV because they had no home ties, right? Mm-hmm. Ask it whatever the heck you want, and it'll try to find an answer for you. If you ask it like how to cook blueberry pie, right? Like it probably won't provide you with anything because we didn't provide it with that content. And it'll answer the question as best as can. And at the bottom of every answer, there will be a list of sources where it pulled it from. Because we want you to go check the sources, make sure it's accurate, make sure it's 100%. And maybe if you're using it to like answer a client question, you can even point your client to that resource and be like, hey, if you want to see for yourself or learn more, here's where we got that information from.
Yes. And I think that is so important. I know that, some people think that, well, ChatGPT can do the same thing. However, just an example of, I use ChatGPT to try and find me a case law, and it found several. And when I went to find the actual source to even Google it, and I said to ChatGPT, I'm like, I cannot find this case law anywhere. And then it said it may have had access to files that are not publicly available. I'm like, how are you accessing things that are not publicly available? This exists nowhere. I don't want you to give me made up stuff. This is me talking to the bot. But it's so important, especially in this, even for the clients, right? Never mind your reputation, but the client, their case is pulling from actual legal casework to be able to support your client's application. So I think that's extremely important and extremely invaluable part of the platform. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Any advice for the solopreneur immigration professionals out there who are trying to make it?
Yeah, it's a great question, especially because number one, it's gotten more competitive than ever. And, because what happened was, going back to our earlier conversation, as all these immigration numbers were going up, so were the number of immigration consultants, because more and more people were seeing this opportunity in this great industry. And what's happened over the last year and a half is the industry has kind of taken a nosedive, and so has the industry a little bit, right? Now, the more established firms are typically fine. The more corporate firms that have like repeat business are typically fine. The really good practitioners are, relatively fine. Some people are pivoting. So the first thing I would probably ask is, what programs am I focused on? Because one of my pieces of advice for new immigration practitioners, and this goes really for any industry, is to niche down, right? Because immigration law is very broad. There's economic, there's refugee, there's family-based, there's a lot. And there's so much changing that staying up to date and getting really good at all of it is very difficult. So like what I did was I niched down, right? I was helping tech companies bring in software developers and then helping them get PR, which meant I didn't have to keep up to date about the refugee changes or the PNPs or the this, that, and the other, right? So number one, niche down. Number two, if you've already niched down, is what you're niched down in good right now, right? The landscape today is very different from 2 years ago, from 5 years ago, from 10 years ago, right? So what I would probably do is I would focus on stuff like spousal sponsorship, PNPs, right? So many people struggling to get enough points through express entry. If you've been sourcing talent from abroad, you might want to look at French-speaking countries. Because if you don't speak French, good luck getting into Canada on PR from outside Canada right now, right? Virtually impossible. What else? Students are still, students are pretty popular, but you got to be a little bit more careful. If you're a lawyer, JRs, mandamus, there's so much demand for that right now because the refusal rates are up. So number one, I would say, make sure you're focused on the right programs. Number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, immigration firms are very simple businesses. You have to go get clients, and then you have to prepare really good applications for them. And if you do that well for long enough, you'll start to get referrals and family members and blah, blah, blah. So my tip number two is get really good at marketing and selling. Right? And this ties into why you don't want to be spending 15 hours on an application, because then you don't have time, especially if you're a solopreneur, to do marketing and sales, right? So my biggest advice is, I would say, I'll give you point number 3, and then I'll jump back to point number 2. Point number 3 is have that fulfillment very efficient, right? So be able to do your file work very efficiently. I'm not saying to skip corners. I'm not saying to submit bad applications. I'm saying leverage tools. Obviously, I have to give a little soft sell for Visto, right? Look at tools like Visto, automation, AI that will help you prepare applications really fast. That will give you more time to jump back to step number 2, market and sell that much better. My biggest piece of advice there is create content, right? I mean, we're recording a podcast right now. It takes time, but it's free to create content. And the reason why I think it's so valuable for almost any service business, but especially law and especially immigration, where trust is at an all-time low because people know all the shady players that are in this industry, is how do you build trust? You start creating and sharing content that's good, that adds value, and that helps people, right? Because all these aspiring immigrants, and they're, largely in their late teens, 20s, 30s, they're on TikTok, they're on LinkedIn, they're on IG, all that random crap. So what I would do if I had to start from scratch is I would start pumping out video content. This is what I did 5 years ago. This is quite literally what I did 5 years ago. Is every day I would wake up and I would record 2 to 3 60-second videos answering immigration questions. So 60-second video. Hey, everybody. My name is Josh, Canadian immigration lawyer. Today's question is about the processing times for a GTS work permit. And I'd answer the question. And the beauty is once you do that enough, you start getting comments with more questions, and that just becomes your content for the next day, right? Thanks, Billy, for your question yesterday about if you could include your spouse and blah, blah, blah. Here's my answer, right? Super easy. Well, you'll get better at it over time. You might, some might find it easy from the get-go. Some might not. You'll get better at it over time. Mine were super low production. If you go on the Visto TikTok, so on TikTok, we have about 55,000 followers on TikTok.
Okay.
If you check it out, I'm not as active there anymore because we're not providing immigration services. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you're going to see all these videos. It's like yours truly sitting on my couch. There's no post-production. I'm not dancing. There's no music. It's just me answering immigration questions. And it did really well. It got us a lot of eyeballs and a lot of, link clicks and stuff like that. So that's what this has turned into a bit of a rant. But those are the 3 pieces of advice I would give is pick the right programs to focus on, create good content around them to drive leads, and then fulfill efficiently. Make sure you have good systems and processes and tech in place.
Yes, and follow up. That's one of my biggest pet peeves with the industry, is poor follow up.
I mean, again, all this goes hand in hand because most firms are so swamped because they're doing manual work. They have to overhire clerks and assistants and stuff like that to do more manual work. So they lose track of this and they forget about this person and they can't follow up. It blows my mind. Sorry, I'm just finishing this rant here. The amount of law firms and immigration consultants and lawyers who you'll email, and you'll get, I posted about this maybe a month or 2 ago. I had a rant post where I said, what drives me nuts is when you email a law firm and you get an auto responder that says, thank you for your email. We'll respond to you within whatever it is, 3 to 5 business days. If I email a company and I get that, I'm never going to hire them because number one, that doesn't make me feel valued, right? Number 2, it's going to be slow service, right? Even at my busiest, my internal rule for my law firm was always I respond to every client within a business day. Even if the response was just, hey, I saw your email, please give me another day and I'll get back to you, right? Because that's, even if you have a bigger firm, that's the personal touch and communication that you want coming from a professional that you're going to be spending $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 with. Right? But what happens? These firms are so inefficient. They're overhiring. They're spending 15 hours on a file. They can't answer basic emails, right? They're going to fall behind to the firms that do. So anyways. Now the rant's over, I
So
promise.
yeah. So this episode is called Dare Immigration Consultants and Lawyers. Check this out. Josh, where can people find you on social?
I'm pretty active. I would say the best place is probably LinkedIn. If you spell my last name right, there's not many others. So find me on LinkedIn. If you're interested in the platform, you can check us out at Visto.ai, Visto.ai. If you want to follow me in the content that I create, LinkedIn is really good. I also have a Substack. So I typically send like 3 to 4 emails a week where I talk about tech and AI and legal and what it's like being a lawyer and what it's like, running a tech startup and stuff like that. So those are probably the 3 best places where to find me.
Perfect. And we'll link them in the description below anyway. You've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much for sharing. It's a good thing that you happened upon immigration law because then the world needed you to create Visto. So thank you for following that lead and going down that rabbit hole and being an amazing guest. This was As Told by Canadian Immigrants or Immigration Stories. If this video was helpful for you, please hit that like button. Please share this with a fellow immigration professional, lawyer, or consultant that you know, or somebody who's even going into the field. And please smash that like button. Subscribe for more helpful videos like this. I will see you in the next video.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.